So, hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the secret to product and marketing alignment. I'm Nicola. I'm the co-founder of CMO Circle with James, who's here today as well, and delighted to welcome two seasoned product leaders to discuss this topic that never seems to get any airtime. I have done so many sessions on sales, marketing, CS, go-to-market alignment, but I don't think product has ever really had a look in. And clearly, it's important because only 13% of you said that your product and marketing teams were working well together. Now, before I hand over to our panelists, please do say hello in chat, and I would like you to rate how well your product and marketing teams are aligned, with 1 being we don't speak and 5 being we're besties. And we're going to chat for around 45 minutes, and we'll make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. So please do pop all your questions into the chat too, and we'll try and get to as many as possible. So Leah, let's hand over to you. Please do introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leah Farmer. I have spent about 25 years in tech of some sort, most of that in product management. Currently, I am the fractional chief product officer at a company called Travel Local, a couple days a week. And the rest of the time, I'm an executive coach and I work with VCs to help them do product due diligence on their portfolio. So those are the kind of, I only do what I like to do these days. So that's how I think about what I do. So
The dream. And Peter?
Hi everyone, I'm Peter Collingridge. So I have also been working in tech for probably more like 27, 28 years now in the UK. Been sort of, I've been a staffer at an agency. I've been a founder of a couple of startups. I went to California for a few years and helped grow a sort of medium stage startup there, and then came back to the UK where I've been either in terrible corporate jobs, some interesting corporate jobs, or startups as well. So I kind of feel I've got the whole spectrum of it, but generally just love product. I would say that I also began my career doing a lot of digital marketing stuff. So I feel quite closely aligned to the sensibilities of marketing people, although you can decide if that's true or not based on what we say.
And there's a definite travel theme, as you're both currently working in travel. It's at least part of your portfolio. So my first question is, what do you think are the key ingredients to running a successful product team? We have lots of marketers in the room, and I think that would be really helpful to understand. Leah.
So I always kind of lean heavily on a few things. Curiosity, I think, is key to a product team. I think courage, because you're going to take some risks. You have to have a perspective. I think if you don't have a perspective, don't waste my time. So curiosity and courage. A lot about connection, because you are often the connecting point between engineers and stakeholders and others. So I think that balance of deep sort of customer obsession, I care about the customer, understanding the business, and being a member of the team is ultimately how I think about great product.
And you mentioned you do some due dil for investors as well. What sort of things do you look for when you do that?
I'm usually looking at, so often there's someone who's done sort of technical due diligence. I then take the technical due diligence, validate whether I think it's quite what they've said, and against sort of, have they truly identified product market fit? Do they understand their customer? And do they have a team and an operating model that aligns with their technical due diligence so that they could actually have a successful startup experience?
And do you see much difference in corporates and startups? Because you've worked with Google, Amazon, and then also some much smaller businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I started my career in startups, often sort of prepping for an acquisition. So, being bought by Intuit or Intel or, bigger companies, TSYS acquiring, things like that. And then ended up in platform product management, leading on kind of all of transaction processing at Amazon, have worked at Expedia, have worked at Klarna. So I've, like you said, and then kind of round tripped my way back into startups. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna go do that. I think there are some differences. I think the big differences is fear. Like, you're not afraid of the lights being turned off for not making payroll, right? Like, if you work at Amazon, some people are getting paid, except for apparently 30,000 less people are getting paid now as of yesterday. But like there's an element of startups that is obviously you got to fill a lot of gaps. You got to figure out, the job and what the job means, because it's not always a straight definition, because they may not have had a product person before. I do think that there is a misunderstanding that in big companies like Amazon or Google or, Expedia, companies like that, the team is fluffier and has, lots of, they can take more time. there's a lot of pressure on those kinds of teams, and then the team is still kind of the heartbeat and kind of the ecosystem, the nucleus of what gets done and what gets built. So, my teams at Amazon were as tight as my teams at startups. So I think it depends a bit. Obviously, the answer is always it depends. But I think that there are some similarities for sure that maybe don't get seen unless you've done both.
And Peter, you work across B2B and B2C. You're with Learnerbly and Much Better Adventures. Do you see
Yeah.
differences there between the product teams?
I mean, I think every product team is different. Every company has a different view of what product is. I generally think that if you stay focused on like the foundations, like really understanding the customer being the starting point and understanding the customer problems, the execution is relatively similar. So I quite like working across both. And I'm quite comfortable going across B2B and B2C. I think the big and small company thing, what I agree with everything that Leah said, having worked also at big companies. I think at the bigger companies, your role is more constrained in scope. Like you tend to have like, a product manager in a startup or one of the ones that I would work with would be expected to be really quite broad, like a broad generalist, but also be able to go quite deep on a lot of things. In a bigger company, that role might be done by a researcher and a product manager and a project manager and a product ops person and maybe a product marketing manager and all that sort of thing. So I think the scope of the work is different on the size of the company as well. And I agree with Leah that the standards are often much higher and the pressure to execute much higher at a bigger company, which I like.
I would just add to that, like I think it also depends on the kind of thing you're doing at a big company. So when I was the last thing I did at Amazon was build out everything on the invoicing side for Amazon Business. And I was the first employee. I had to build the architecture, I had to design it, hire the team, do all the things. So it was a startup because I had gone and begged for funding, got the funding, and then turned around and built the team and did it. So it was a little bit different than if I had joined a team with a TPM and a this and a that and all those things. So I think it also, there's an element of that can shift around as well.
So it depends where you sit in that business. So a question I'm dying to ask. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions from marketing about product? Leah, let's stick with you.
From marketing about product.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a misconception that maybe that we enjoy saying no. And I mean, let's be honest, sometimes I like to say no. No.
I've definitely thought that in the past.
We like to say no, that we are slow and only thinking about, like midterm and long term and not quick hits. So I think those are the two big ones I get. And that we don't often, maybe that we're not growth minded, like we don't understand the business. And I mean, I've said this a number of times on the podcast that I co-host with a friend of mine. Like I get really itchy when someone refers to the business and product management is not part of the business because we have to understand to build products. So
you're not part of the TPM, yeah.
Options in there.
What's the most frustrating things that marketers say to you, Leah?
I've had probably the thing that has over the years made me just like is when someone says you don't understand our cycles and how our business works and how the conversion works and I'm like, yes, I do. Do you want me to explain it? Right. So I mean, the same thing I say to engineers who say you can't be a CTO. I'm like, try me, ask me a question. Right. So I don't think I know everything, but I'm a good learner and B, I understand a lot about how business runs. So, I think give me a shot.
Peter, empathizing with that?
I empathize with all of that. I mean, if you want to ask me what the worst question is, it would be, can't you just squeeze it into this sprint? Can't you just do it? That's like guaranteed to upset.
I think I might have said that a few times.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
sure.
I'm seeing a few people nodding their heads here. Yeah.
And the misconception there isn't because we're divas or obstreperous or kind of don't want to help. It's more that I think like a good product engineering team is a very delicate system, and getting all the pieces in equilibrium is really hard and takes a lot of work, and it's really easy to throw that off. Distraction is one of them. like not completing things can really upset people and create hangovers for the next thing. So some of the principles or kind of things you have to hold sacred are you do what's in the sprint and you don't change the sprint when it's going on, because that's what you've committed to. So it's not because people are being difficult, it's just because that's their coping mechanism for handling the complexity and the fragility of the system that they're in. On the whole, product and engineering people want to help.
And when people ask you that question, do you explain that to them, or have you got so sick of it, you're just like, no?
Well, I think that the problem, the most recent example of that is not when they ask me, it's when they kind of go to people in the team. Like if a founder goes to somebody in the team and says, can you just do this? That kind of short circuits the whole system, because even in a happy, friendly organization, a founder asking a question like that, everybody wants to say yes to it. So what then has to happen is I have to go behind the scenes and talk about why that's a bad thing to do or what the unintended consequences of it might be. In some places, I have actually encoded that into OKRs where you have OKRs for the team, but you also have an OKR for the management team, which is like, we will have 0 instances of somebody asking, can you squeeze us in? And we will have 0 changing of the goalposts. And you make that accountable to the leadership team to help them understand they're part of this system, right? And the system breaks through unintended consequences of trying to do the right thing.
Has anyone actually managed to achieve that 0 last minute? Can we squash this?
I think last quarter I had a 0 on one of the key results. I think I had a couple of, we called them violations, which isn't probably the most friendly language, but that was
Is it usually the founder?
Yeah, well, there can be multiple founders and transgressors of the problem.
And if we turn the tables, what do you think's been your biggest misconception about marketing?
I think, well, like I said, I began my career particularly working with marketing people, and I had originally, I had wanted to go into advertising. I'd wanted to be a creative person in advertising. I'd often seen marketing as a creative endeavor, which it absolutely is and can be, but it's also a spectrum where you've got sort of art and science, and the art side is the kind of creative part, but the science is the execution and the performance and the data, and probably getting into close to the area that I do a lot of work in now, which is growth. And so understanding there's this spectrum of like marketing, creative, and science through data and growth and product and engineering, and that actually all of these things should be aligned on that spectrum. I think that has taken, I would say a lot of the people that I work with don't understand how closely aligned product and marketing are in terms of delivering the outcomes that the business has got to have.
So there's some education to be done there. How have you done that in your team out of interest? Got that deeper understanding of what marketing's really about?
I think it's an education and maturity and kind of personality profile. I think not everybody wants to be in a team where they understand that they are a cost to the business, and whatever they do should be earning more money than they are costing the business, and there should be an ROI and everything, and choosing the things with the highest ROI for the business is the most productive thing to be doing. And that's fine, because sometimes those people want to be working more on infrastructure things where it's more abstract for them. But I've also worked in places, and I'm still working in places, where people are highly motivated by those commercial goals. So you just have to get to know your team. You have to be clear about expectations. You have to see who pulls that stuff from you, give people challenges, see how they respond to it. It's that delicate system thing. You're always thinking about who's the best fit in which space, and some people can grow into it and some people can't, and you just find the right place for them in that condition.
Right. And Leah, on your side, what do you think was your biggest misconception about marketing over the years?
All right, I have this cough that is driving me crazy. So if I have to mute to the cough from your ears, I'll let you know. But I think I was a business major in undergrad, and then got a master's degree and an MBA, and was like, I think I know what marketing is. And then I think as I started to really work, especially I think in startups, because in big companies, you're often sort of you're not super close to it in the kind of work that I was doing in fintech. And so I think realizing how broad marketing is, kind of going to what Peter said, I think realizing how broad marketing is and that it's not only brand, it's not only pricing, it's not only advertising, it's not only, I think the way it's taught versus what it actually is, and the growth element and the kind of the growth of growth across time has opened my eyes to it. And I think fundamentally the really tight coupling of marketing and growth with data, I think, and Peter mentioned that as well, has been really eye-opening for me. That is ultimately, if you do that really well and have the right data like ecosystem, you should be pumping that data back in growth and getting something from it. I didn't understand all of that when I started, for sure.
Yeah, definitely some education to be done there from us marketeers, I think. So, Leah, you know I love a horror story. What has been your worst experience of working with marketing? And then I want a really positive one too, please.
Okay.
'Cause
My
I
worst
know
experience, let's see, in tw the in 2017, I moved to Sweden to work for a company called Klarna. They do buy now, pay later. Some of you may have heard of them. They were in the midst of a big consumer brand overhaul. They'd gone from kind of banker blue, fintech, the whole nine, to like this pink, smooth. They got Snoop Dogg to do their ads. They got Celeste Barber to do their ads. They were doing all this cool shit, right? They had their chief marketing officer is one of the kind of coolest guys I've ever known. Like he knows all the people, right? Let me call Snoop Dogg, that kind of guy. Um, but I ran the merchant division. I ran everything merchant, and marketing did not give a flip about merchant. They owned marketing and design and product marketing, and everything was all focused on the consumer brand and overhauling this brand experience. Meanwhile, all the money is made in merchant. And so it was a long-term strategy to build this consumer brand, but I had 17 teams and one designer, while the consumer brand teams, each team had a designer. I had no marketing people, but I had companies like ASOS and H&M and IKEA coming to me and saying like, "Hey, we need some partnering on this." And I'm like, then I go to marketing and they'd be like, "No, we don't have time for that." And I'm like, "You don't have time for them?" And they were like, "I guess maybe." And they would sort of eke out a little bit of resource if it was H&M, right? But for the most part, I kind of had to build my own sort of little tiger team that focused on marketing and helping, because we had merchants like H&M all the way down long tail to small mom and pop stores. And so I had to figure out how to handle helping them. And it was just hard because it was this constant, every year I'd go in and pitch for budget and they'd be like, "Oh, no, you don't need any marketing budget. Move on." And I'd be like, "Okay," and so, it was really, really hard. It was hard to explain to my team. It was hard to
Yeah.
explain why, but meanwhile, we were making like 75% of the revenue.
God. And was that just because of the objectives coming down from the top? It just wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big push to be a consumer app, a consumer brand. This is what's important. How do you get this visible? And I mean, it's paid off. And let's be honest, they just IPO'd and it's paid off for them. But it was a nightmare to be on the merchant side. We just got real scrappy. I stole resources from my teams and built this little team that was responsible for sort of marketing, stuff with our merchants, and working with them, giving them, resources, helping them with onboarding, helping them with how they told the story in their stores and things like that. So we got there, and as usual, you just get scrappy, but it was like I felt like I was always fighting an uphill battle.
So for marketers, look where the revenue's coming from and support. And on a positive note, tell us one that we can learn from where it was really great alignment.
Yeah, when I left Klarna, I went to work at a startup called Tour Lane. It's a multi-day tour company, very similar to the company I'm at now in Berlin. And I went to work for two co-founders, one of whom is a marketing guru. He sold his first company to Airbnb and worked for Nate. Like he's that kind of, he knows marketing inside and out. We spent the first, I would say, I was working directly for him. And we spent the first 6 months just having debates about the role of product and the role of marketing and where does this fit and where's the line and da 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 da. And after a while, we heard each other saying it depends. Well, I don't know, it depends. And it was he taught me so much about marketing and I taught him so much about product that we both, if you asked us now, we'd both say, I mean, across time, there is a blend in here, and there's a person who can probably run the gamut between both, depending on, what the team is. And it was such a good education to work with somebody patient enough to teach me what I needed to know, but also that was patient enough to learn what I knew and treat me as an expert, not as like throwaway, oh yeah, product people, they're so diva-ish, right? But he was very interested in doing it well and doing it right.
So very much an internal partnership.
Yeah, very much.
Peter, what about you?
Good or bad or both?
Bit of both, please.
So I'm going to name names because Leah wasn't afraid to name names. So in fact, I'm going to say that the best and worst, well, good and bad, both at the same company. This was at the Times newspaper. So I'd been in California working on this B2B SaaS business, done a really good job helping them grow, and was basically hired to run products at the Times, which had just switched to subscription. Like it was in the early days of subscription, which obviously a lot of newspapers are doing now. And the brief was basically do what you did for that SaaS company. SaaS and subscription basically the same thing, do the same thing at the Times. And product was very distinct from marketing, and marketing was just basically bonused and measured on the number of people that they brought into the top of the funnel. And so they were giving away Nespresso machines, they were giving away iPads in return for taking out a 6-month subscription. And then there were questions like, well, why is everybody churning? Why is the product so bad that everybody is churning on month 7? It's like, they're not churning on month 7. They're churning because like they don't have to pay anymore. And yeah, really trying to build the cohort analysis and the campaign origination to point to that data point when everybody's like, no, we're just going to keep on. They're sort of addicted to the top line numbers of having that many people being subscribed every month and not thinking about the downstream effect of when you get someone to sign up for something that isn't aligned to the core proposition. So that was the very, very worst of it, and it manifested in loads of different ways. However, the best of it was when we managed to build a cross-functional team with marketing people on a team with product and engineering working in 2-week sprints to actually run experiments on the website to align activations and acquisition around the core proposition, in other words, the journalism. Like that, I would say we set the goal of tripling the conversion rate in 12 weeks. We actually did it in 4 weeks, and sort of set up a whole new way of working between the teams. It's quite hard to get permission to run that in the first place, but it became a model for cooperation and broke down a lot of silos along the way as well. So I think with the right model, you can break through it, but it's often the incentives and the questions that are being asked at the very top of the house that create those bad behaviors further down.
And that's a perfect segue onto my next question, which is, what is your top tip into breaking down these silos and improving that collaboration? I mean, there's been a couple of questions around like, how does marketing make sure they get input into the product roadmap? And you've talked about these cross-functional teams. If you're going into a business where there is a big divide between the two, what are some of your methodologies to bring them together?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's got to make sense, right? So it doesn't make sense to bring them together if they're working on different initiatives and they're not aligned. Like I think the benefit that Leah and I have is we're often brought in by the CEO or someone at the board level or something like that, and so you have a certain audience that you can just make that case to. The data also really helps. So if you take the Times, for example, or a subscription business looking at a traditional funnel analysis of things. Yeah, if you're looking at the top of the funnel and you say, okay, well, acquisition marketing largely owns that. Activation on the website is a joint endeavor, and probably what happens in the shopping basket conversion is probably a product endeavor. Aligning where and it does and doesn't make sense to be cross-functional is a good idea, and get it. And you have to get obviously C-level buy-in to make that cascade through the org and give everybody the resources that they need to do that. Tactically, a design sprint is a really good way of making a team of frenemies kind of become friends and work together, because you lock them in a room together for a week and force them to come with an outcome on it.
And when you talk about these design sprints, can you tell us a little bit more about how that would work as a cross-functional team?
Yeah, so design sprint is basically something that was pioneered at Google. It's a 5-day thing, which is really 4 days and a 5th day of testing something with users. you decide what the problem is that you want to solve on the first day. So it might be, how do we drive sign-ups to our subscription product on the website? You have 5, 6, 7 people there with very specific roles. You have a decider, you have a troublemaker whose job is to make trouble and to ask difficult questions. You have a designer, you have an engineer, and then you spend 2 days sketching it. The decider decides which is the best one that they think is going to work. The team then prototypes that and puts it together and then shows it to customers on the 5th day. And effectively in a week, the team is forced together to solve a very difficult problem. And you get actual data back from customers that isn't just like the head of marketing's opinion about what works, or the head of product's opinion. And it just forces kind of alignment around first principles, which is, what's the problem? And have we found an elegant way to solve that customers give us honest feedback about? It's a brilliant method.
And who's in those teams?
In the design sprint or afterwards?
Yeah, in the design sprint and afterwards, yeah.
So often it's product engineering, design, and marketing that's the core that I found. And then you have to work out who the decider is, which is often like a COO or a CEO or a CTO, and they have to ultimately choose the right thing, but they often have you hope, the maturity and the objectivity to do the right thing. But you're putting together the team that you would expect to execute on the thing when it goes into production as well.
And is that something you've really had to push to the top to actually allow you to do these cross-functional teams? Because I can imagine it can be quite a difference in some setups. It's like, well, no, that's not how we work. What's your kind of business case as to how to get this at least tested out?
I think the first time is hard. The second time is easy when they see what the results are like. So often the way to sell it in, you're obviously working on a really important problem that they don't know the answer to, right? Otherwise, it's not worth doing a design sprint because it's relatively expensive. But you align around the problem and you understand that the problem is important to the business. And then you work out what you're going to give the business data that tells them to go in this direction or not. Rather than spending 6 months building something that doesn't work, you're going to spend 4 days building something that will give a clear path forward. So the hard bit about it is decoupling people from, basically they've got to take a week off their day jobs, and nobody believes that you're going to get something in a week that's going to be helpful. But of course you always do get it. So it's more of a selling in job. But again, I think Leah, probably from the way you're nodding, like we've both had experiences that the results speak for themselves, really. And
just a couple of requests in chat. Can you give a couple of examples of where you've really seen these design sprints work and move the needle?
I mean, I was at Travel Local before Leah and hired Leah to replace me. I mean, do you want to talk about the impact of the design sprint there, Leah?
I think that's a good one. The company had really never done anything like this before, and I think for them, they were really struggling to, and you were there, obviously, Peter, I wasn't, but I think there was a real struggle to understand, what problem are we actually solving that we need to go get information on, not just guessing and deciding what we think we already know. There was a lot of assumption about, well, we know what we're trying to solve for. Do you? Because it's not working. Every time you try to solve it, it doesn't work. It's not actually having the impact you want it to have. And so I do think, working through what do customers really want, having those conversations, kind of figuring out where should we attack the problem, really did it. Not only did it let us obviously I wasn't there, but let Peter and the team prove figuring it out this way together is the better way forward. It also then, because something was produced out of it, it made room for us to do it again at different times. So I do think that there's a benefit there.
It's often marketing stuff, right? So in the case of Travel Local, it was the website conversion rate wasn't as high as we thought it could be. It's people don't understand the proposition, they don't understand the language we're using. We've done a bunch of customer research using Jobs to be Done to really understand why people were coming to Travel Local and then what they wanted. And doing the design sprint, we redesigned landing pages, put them in front of customers, got a load of different responses based on how we kind of configured the modules on the landing page, and then put those into an A/B test on the website where you could push volumes of traffic through it and see which ones converted best at the top of the funnel all the way through to the bottom of the funnel, just by changing language, or the positioning or the proposition. Like nothing, it's not really product, like let's build a product with lots of features. It was like, let's make sure that the visitors to this website understand what we're selling, because confusion is normally the biggest driver of like abandonment or bounce rate. So it was really focusing in on marketing problems as expressed through the product, in this case, a website.
And that actually ties in perfectly with Elena's question, which was about growth marketing. So we're seeing so often now, it's not a head of growth, sorry, it's not a head of marketing, we're seeing head of growth, chief growth officer. And so much of it to be successful is to do with product. So it's experimentation with website checkout flows. Leah, when you get these heads of growth in who really have a marketing team and don't necessarily have product under their remit, how is it best to collaborate with product and get buy-in from product? Because often the business is saying, right, marketing, I want you to do this, but they can't do it without product who don't necessarily have the same goals.
Yeah, so a couple things come to my mind. Like, I think the first thing in my mind is you have to align as a growth team and a product team. I think you have to align around the purpose rather than processes. If you get down in the processes, like, are you going to give me this form and I fill out this thing and this, who gives a shit? Do we agree on the purpose of what we're doing? Do we define the customer the same way? Who is it? What do we not know about them? What do we think? What are our assumptions about them? What do we, so some of it is getting down to the nuts and bolts of like, who are we and what do we believe? And then I think then I think you have to go in and say, okay, what are our shared goals? What are our shared KPIs? What are our shared OKRs? Whatever those are. And how do each of us participate in that? And then I'm a big fan of, embedded teams, cross-functional teams. How do you get somebody, if you're working on something, that the marketing person is in the team, working, understands the sprint, is in retros, having those conversations, like how do we do that? And vice versa. If the marketing team is working in a certain way, trying to do something, the product manager or product designer, whoever you have, going in and working with them on research and helping them kind of define, certain terms, and like, how do you have that exchange? One of the biggest things I say when we're struggling in this space is we can't compete in here in the house. We're competing with people out there who want to eat our lunch. So we're on a team. So let's figure out how to be on a team. And that's why I say, like, process comes and you can define process together and you can make, adjustments to what those processes are. So when we get into the question of, well, how do I get my stuff on the roadmap? I'm not sure that's the exact right question. The question is, what problem do you need solved, and how can we start having that discussion and figure out how to solve the problem, and is it the right problem? Then we can talk roadmap and the tactics to get something into the roadmap. But often I find we start with, how do I get my shit on the roadmap? It's
Right.
like, what's going on? What are you trying to
Whereas actually let's start with a bigger picture.
Yeah.
What are the core goals here? And then that actually flows really nicely into what are the shared KPIs? Because if you're working together on these things, you're of course going to have shared KPIs. I think another thing that often causes issues is ownership. Like, who owns the website? Who owns customer research? What's your response when people say things like that? Because I've had situations where customer research seems to be done by various different teams. So products are doing some, marketing are doing some, customer success are doing some, and we're all potentially reaching out to the same customers who end up totally confused.
Right. I mean, my answer to that question, to any question, probably 95% of the answers to all the questions is it depends. Depends on the focus of your business, depends on the maturity of your business, depends on the season of your business, depends on the team you have, the context you have, the resources you have. But I do think there has to be a coming together to say, who owns this stuff? Because listen, I don't want to spend my life arguing about who owns the website. Like, I don't want to. And so what do we have to do to get to, what are we trying to solve on the website? What is the goal on the website, and how do we achieve that goal? Let's have that conversation. Because if we're just going to argue about who owns it, then the biggest bully on the playground is going to win. Like, and I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, someone just commented the who owns piece grates my nerves so badly because often it's empire building.
Yeah.
That question just tells you you're in a political organization.
Yep.
And because the right answer is, like, we all own it and we've got to work together. If it's important, we've got to fix it. So
everyone, if you have a discussion about that, there's your answer. I think that's a nice little snippet there as well. And what's your advice? Like, if I'm a marketer and I really want to start looking at doing these cross-functional teams, but I'm getting a lot of pushback from the CPO, the CTO, how do you best approach this?
Is that
I'm bringing you in, Peter, to say, right, can you pitch this for me?
I mean, so I'm a product person, obviously, and I often think about things in black and white, right? And black and white is how I think about prioritization. Is it priority or is it a non-priority? Because that's ultimately the only way to like. There's always like a million things you want to do, and you can only actually do one of them. So I think the way you have to resolve that question is to convince the decision makers in the organization what the priority is, and then everything flows from that. I'm not sure that you can do it either at a peer level. I think you've got to get basically going through the CEO or the CTO or the leadership team and resolve those questions. I like forcing issues onto the table and talking about it. I like healthy conflict more than sort of toxic positivity. And I think it is a sign of a healthy organization if you can have those difficult conversations without them getting personal or political or the rest of it. Like that's for me, that's one of the key indications of a sort of company that I want to work with is like, okay, have you got a big problem? Can we talk about it like grown-ups? And then can we work together on a solution for it? But I think it's a bit like that political one. It's just like if it's about the ownership or something else, if you're trying to convince somebody else at your level, you probably need to escalate it up to get a decision made or otherwise. And decisions are hard, right?
I think something Peter just said that I think is really important for me is when I go into somewhere new or I'm trying to make a transform something, trying to move something forward. If all the conversations are about personality and not about our core, like what are the problems we want to solve together and why are we struggling with that? Is it, what are the reasons why we're struggling to align? If every time it's a personality problem, you got to go have a real hard conversation at the big boy table and the big girl table and say, we got some personality conflicts that are absolutely muddying the ability for us to do the thing we're trying to do. Let's tell the damn truth. Right. And, it's okay. And like, listen, I would rather somebody look me in the face and say, I don't like you and I don't like working with you and I don't like your style. And I can say, great, you don't have to like me. How could we work better together? What would you need from me in order to work with me? And not just be belligerent. Oh, okay. I would need you to do this. Okay, I can do that. Then are we done? Because I'm not going to wake up tomorrow a different human. Like I'm going to be this annoying woman tomorrow morning too, right? But we can figure out how to work together. That's my job as a product person. I'm looking for how do I thread the needle and solve the problem? Do you need me to behave differently? Cool. What does it look like? But if we are having personal conversations that are about personality, we are having the wrong damn conversation every time.
Leah, how often do you think it is down to personalities and empire building, and you've actually had to have that type of conversation?
I think what happens is it starts out as probably there is a problem and they need to work it out. And somebody or somebodies in the conversation either ignore it or diminish it or disrespect it or push it away or ignore it or use all of the things that are disrespectful. And so then you actually start to build problem in the relationship that is personal. And we can all sit here all day and be like, it's business, it's not personal. We are humans doing business. Therefore, when someone comes at us, it's personal. And so what happens is personality starts to win the day. Like, again, like I said, biggest bully, loudest mouth, whatever. And so what starts out as a reasonable alignment problem often turns into a personality conflict. And now you've got to go unravel this to get back to there or pull people out of the mix, whatever you got to do to get back to the actual problem you're trying to solve, which is a customer issue that you need to get in front of. How do we solve a problem for our customer that benefits our business and our stakeholders? Full stop. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. But we get wrapped up in personality conflict because we won't have honest conversations. We won't just say, I don't like working with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, awesome. But I work here. I worked I had a team once that I was a CTPO and the engineers resented that I was the CTO because I'm not an engineer. And I said, after about 6 months of doing my job, they just hammered away at me about how I wasn't good at my job. And it wasn't true. I was good at my job. And finally I said, I'm not going anywhere. We're having all hands, and I said, I'm just going to say it one time, not leaving. So you either have to get on board or get out. Those are the only options. And if you want to, I will take your feedback on how I could do my job better all damn day. So they actually I ran a 360. They gave me the feedback. It was anonymous. And then I had an all hands and I showed every lick of feedback. I showed every word they said about me. And the co-founders were like, this is so uncomfortable. I mean, every horrible thing they said, I just put it on the slide and we talked through it. And 6 months later, when I did the same thing, wasn't there.
Oh, Leah, you're giving me goosebumps. You're so brave.
I'm like, if you're gonna say it to my damn face. Like, let's do this. Like, I know how difficult I am. I am 50 years old. I did not wake up this morning and go, I wonder if sometimes people don't like working with me. I'm difficult. I'm opinionated, right? But let's talk about it. I'm also kind and loving and a person who cares genuinely about you and your feelings. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So important, to be honest. And actually, this is another question that I had for you there. If I'm a new CMO joining a business, what's the best or the first thing I should be asking my counterpart in product to really unlock good alignment? How do I get off on the right foot? I don't. Peter, I'll come to you first while Leah has a coughing fit after that.
I mean,
Obviously not
so
saying how many things can I squeeze in this week?
well, no. I mean, look, one of the things that's been consistent through my career is I'm not a very adept political maneuver maker, and I tend to, light my way with the bridges that I burn. So I know that I need to do more to build relationships rather than have practical conversations. So I would just start on a good foot, assume positive intent. You can ask good questions like, when you interview for a job as a CPO, you might ask the team, what's the last thing we shipped and why, or what are you working on and why? And often people can tell you what they're working on, you hope, but they can't tell you why it is. You might ask them, what do we understand about our customers? That I think solid research around the customer is the cheat code for my job, like really understanding the customer. That, like, to so many of the questions that we've been talking about in the last few minutes, having really professionally done third-party objective research about the customer aligns on what the problem is and cuts through a lot of those personality things that we've talked about. So I think having those conversations around the customer and the problems priorities, but really doing that through a relationship building sense rather than just a transactional one.
And if they don't seem to have a clue, not looking too horrified.
Seeing that as an opportunity, for sure.
Leah, what about you? What would you recommend?
My answer is always like, the first question is like, who do you think the customer is? What do you know about them so far? Let's talk about it. Because I think it's a decent starting point to try to figure out calibration. Like how much do we need to educate? How much do we need to talk about it? How far off are we? Do we all disagree and we need to go have some conversation? I think it's a good starting point in my mind. And I mean, I agree. Like, obviously, I'm not going to start there. I'm going to be like, hey, how was your weekend? Or do you know where the coffee pot is or anything like that? But also, like, I think diving in, I'm a straight in kind of person in case you haven't figured that out. So I want to know, like, what do you think this is? And let's talk about it. Because maybe you see something. I'm also a big believer in fresh eyes. Someone new coming in and having conversations. I'm like, what are you hearing that I might not know? Right? Because if I'm not the new person, they're gonna have a perspective that I'm gonna be like, oh, I want to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. You also mentioned something before about what would you do if you were me, which I think is a great one as well.
Yeah.
So
Who else should I be talking to? What would you do if you were me? And what questions should I be asking you that I haven't yet? Like
yeah,
those are like Coach Primo questions, right? How can I go
that
in?
makes you happy, which is what we want as marketers, to have a happy CPO. So just two more questions. How do you think the rise of AI is going to impact product teams? Leah, you're thinking deeply.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, the way I think about this is AI should be already making us faster at the mundane. So as a product manager, if I never have to write another user story, right? Like, thank God, because it's not my favorite thing. Never was, quite frankly. That's awesome if I can get that, that sort of bit of it done. Um, I think that um, it's probably gonna collapse the mushy parts between all of our roles a bit, and there's gonna be some places where we go, oh, this is also now I'm kind of squeezing over into marketing, and marketing squeezing over growth is squeezing over into me, and I'm squeezing over into design and engineering. That's gonna happen as well. I think the thing to remember is that humans are the people that build stuff for humans still. As of yet, that is still true. And so we need humans involved in this. And I think there's an element of, as all of you know, AI thinks we're all brilliant and it still hallucinates. So don't let it build all your shit because it's not going to build it right. Like, I mean, we were making these little videos for a contest and I had a little sloth hanging from a tree and it points at something and it had a third arm. And I was like, I'm leaving that shit in there so that everybody knows that I don't think that sloths have three arms, right? So, but I mean, when we think about how it will change things, it should make us faster. There will be a smushing and together, but it's not solving the problems of the world yet.
But it is killing our brain cells. I'm going to share an article that Leah shared with me from MIT about the impact of AI.
Yeah, the article was interesting because it was like people who do their own thinking, people who use search engines, and people who use LLMs, and like the degradation of our thought. It was an MIT study, and I was all, oh no, I'm getting dumber.
Yeah, AI is making us more stupid. Peter, what are your thoughts? What's in your crystal ball?
Yeah, I mean, basically that the role of product, I think, is to think really clearly about what you're going to do and why, because the opportunity cost is really, really high, and you just got to make the right choices, and you can't outsource that to an AI. You've got to think from first principles. You've got to think about your customer. Like the amount of slop that just gets regurgitated around without that passes for good thinking, I think is really risky. So I think talked about this elsewhere, but like one of the teams that I'm working in at the moment, we have like a recognition that this MIT study is, like AI is making us stupider. So we're almost like a gym, going to the gym or going running together. We're doing a book group with like fiction, non-fiction books, like designed to get us thinking and talking about stuff to kind of try and stop those muscles from atrophying as much as possible.
I've just had a question in from Charlotte. So, very much around customer insight perspective, how important is customer feedback in terms of your product development lifecycle? And is there a way that product can provide better support to orchestrate or accelerate that insight?
So important. Very important.
Very important.
Yeah, I mean, and Peter, obviously, he loves this stuff. So the thing I will say is that in a in a perfectly humming team, I want every team to be doing discovery and customer research. I want them to be doing some experimentation, and I want them to be doing a build. Like I want there to be something happening everywhere. In a really well-oiled machine, I want to see that. And so that feedback loop should be quick and should be providing information right back into the ecosystem so that we can actually pivot or edit what we're doing.
And what can marketing do to best support that?
It's a good question. Go ahead, Peter. I'm just kidding.
Over to Peter.
Well, so when I've been in the roles where I've been most successful, we have commissioned this research I was talking about, so third-party professional research to understand the customer from a qual and a quant perspective, and then that is a joint initiative between product and marketing that is going to feed into both sets of activities, but really it's going to align everyone and the whole leadership team and stop this kind of, oh, but my view of the customer this is my view of the customer this, or what it's called the highest paid person's opinion, which is like the CEO thinks that they should build the thing in this way. Like it is just the best score settling kind of bet deciding answer to everything, and it pays for itself like 10 times over. So I think that is the most impactful thing that I've seen consistently, is working on strategic research to understand your customers, like 20, 30 interviews, a few hundred or a few thousand, depending on whether it's B2C surveys, to build a picture, getting alignment around that at the board level, at the leadership team level, and then sort of cascading that down into something like a design sprint, and then into tactical user testing for every feature you're thinking about doing. It should run through absolutely everything, but it's very hard if you're just doing it at this kind of tactical level, because there's this great thing I heard recently, which was like, diagnose with data, treat with design. That's the thing, right? So the data, qual and quant, tells you what the problem is, particularly at the strategic level, and then the way that you're building and designing these features tells you if you're doing it right.
Can
I
I
love that. Diagnose the data, treat with design. Sorry, Leah.
I was going to piggyback on that. I think one of the things, I recently had a situation where we we experimented on something, gathered the data, it was successful. We decided to go ahead and build it. And then kind of at the last minute, somebody from marketing was like, there's this other piece of data that I don't know if anybody has seen, but blah, blah, blah. And then when they showed it to us, we were like, well, shit, that thing we thought was working is not working. And so if your intuition says, something about this isn't right, dig. If you have a piece of data that you think we haven't seen, dig. If there's a question that you're like, have you thought of it this way? Dig. Like, come in and dig at us with that, because the data you have, we're sometimes not on purpose. We sometimes just aren't paying attention to it because we've based our model on some other piece of information. Give us that data, because sometimes we don't even know what we're looking for. In this particular case, had no idea that piece of data even existed. If I'd known, I'd have been like, oh, well, that's important, right? So I think, like, don't be afraid to be like, I have a question. Doesn't look right. Let's talk about it.
I think that's such a good point, because I think sometimes marketing, like, oh, I've just got to let product get on with it. They're going to be annoyed if I share additional stuff, because sometimes we have a lot more insight in different areas just because of the campaigns we're running or tests we might have done. And one question from Paul, and I've only got a few minutes left. What's your view on actually just not separating product and marketing and having them as one team organizationally?
I think it can work. I mean, I think it depends. Again, my answer is it depends, but I think it can work. It's sort of the same answer I give when someone asks about CTPO, right? If you're going to have a person in that role of CTO and CPO, you either have to have a engineer who's very product minded, or a product person who understands engineering and is technical. I can't be a straight line CPO and run engineering. I have to be able to do both. If you want to bring product and marketing together, you're gonna have to look for somebody who has that growth mindset and can cross the chasm a bit and understands both sides.
Yeah.
That's my thought. I don't know what Peter thinks.
PMO, Chief Product Marketing Officer. Peter, have you ever done that role?
I have. In California, I had the marketing team reporting to that's B2B and enterprise and B2C SaaS. But that was much more of it wasn't really brand driven. So I think brand, like the brand comms level, it's hard for someone like me to own that. Whereas the performance and the growth side of things, where it is more looks like a sprint and you're doing CRM activity and SEO and all that sort of stuff, it's easier. I think I feel the same way about this. I feel about whether product and technology should be the same. I like healthy tension, and I think it's important to have healthy tension between those teams, because I think that's how you get to the best answers. Obviously, it can make a top-heavy organization or add to cost or something else, so you have to be tactical about it. But like, I think you should, like, that tension makes for better decision making, which is really important. Otherwise, you can just have somebody who, is unchecked or like pushes too many things through as well. So
Helps you making assumptions, doesn't it? Because often in teams we'll have assumptions that customers do this, and if you've got another team that's challenging you, it makes you rethink those. So
yeah, it depends what stage of business that you are. I think I'd feel different about it in B2B and B2C, like particularly when you got to build a brand, that sort of stuff. So
yeah. Last question, because I know we only have a couple of minutes left. If the marketeers on this call were going to take one thing away, what would it be? Leah.
Yeah, my answer is always to this question, no matter what the topic, like, stay curious, ask more questions. You should be asking more questions than you're talking.
I thought you were going to say it depends then.
Yeah, it also it depends.
And Peter?
I think it would be work with product to get the research done to build a unified view of the customer, because that's going to cut through everything else.
And get a test of a design sprint going if you're not already.
Yeah, for sure. That'll fall out the bottom of it. Right.
Yeah. Okay. If people have more questions, are you happy for them to reach out on LinkedIn?
Of course.
Totally love that.
Fantastic. Okay. I will share the recording because you may want to listen back to it or play it to other people in your business. You might want to be playing this to your CPO and share LinkedIn profiles as well. But just want to say massive thank you to Peter and Leah. This has been so fun. I've really enjoyed it. Great insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.